welcome Talal. I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I have to show you what a fangirl I am. Do you have more books than this?
These are the current two that I have. There should be another one coming out by the end of the year, hopefully.
Okay, so for people who don't know, I totally geek out on your books. Like I am the biggest fangirl, which is weird because you specialize in affairs. And so people who don't know that I'm a therapist, I don't know how did you get to this podcast, but people who don't know that I'm a therapist would be like, why are you so fascinated? Because this is the hardest stuff about being a couples therapist is dealing with affairs.
It is. And this was actually one of the main reasons why I decided to specialize in infidelity recovery. It blows my mind. It's one of those topics that we've been dealing with since the beginning of, committed relationship, yet we are still so ill-equipped to deal with it. So I'm glad that you're liking the books and you have an interest in this topic.
Well, how did you decide, like, hey, I get it, I'm going to be a couples therapist, but yet I'm going to specialize in the hardest. It's like it wasn't enough to climb Mount Everest. I decided I needed to like build a house there with no oxygen at the top. Like, how did you decide I'm going to do the hardest part of couples therapy?
Well, I'll give you the short version. So many moons ago, when I was a young intern, I really wanted to give myself a well-rounded clinical experience. So I wanted to work with every population possible with every level of care. And at the end of that journey, I realized that I really like working with couples because it's suited to my personality. It's complicated, it's intense. It's like, conducting an orchestra.
Oh, I like that. That's yes, true. Okay.
And when I decided to set up my private practice, I exclusively working with couples. I began to find out that most couples are not usually coming in for a tune-up. Usually they're coming in for a crisis. Large majority of them coming for a crisis related to either current infidelity or past infidelity.
Yeah.
So as they say, need is mother of invention. I have this vantage point of working primarily with couples who are dealing with infidelity. Started jotting down my observation, began to see patterns where people get stuck. And that really what led me to create the systematic affair recovery therapy model.
Which is astonishing. I mean, for people that are not part of the therapy world, I have gone to your symposiums, I've read your books. I very much resonate with the way that you suggest that we view affairs as therapists. And I'm incredibly grateful for the work that you do. So for those of us that are not therapists that are listening, can you kind of walk us through the affair journey? So first question everyone's listening for is, how do affairs happen?
Well, so I always encourage people to look at the causes of infidelity from three main lenses. I think we're all kind of socialized to think when people having affairs, they're usually having an affair because of relationship dissatisfaction. Now, it is true, relationship dissatisfaction is one of the leading factors of infidelity, but it's not the only one. We all have seen people or worked with folks who, when we look at it, we don't get it. Like they seem to be with the perfect partner who's meeting all their needs, but despite that, they're still dealing with infidelity. So sometimes it's not a relationship factor. Sometimes it's an individual issue that the unfaithful partner is dealing with. And there is a variety of mental health issues that a person can have that could increase the likelihood for them engaging in infidelity. I'll just share two ones. And again, please, just because somebody has this mental health issue doesn't mean they're doomed to be unfaithful. Right. It just have higher likelihood. For example, when you have somebody who has the bipolar disorder and they're dealing with a manic episode, part of the symptoms is poor impulse control, reckless behavior, and sometimes that can manifest through infidelity. If you have somebody who's dealing with personality disorders, narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder, those folks tend to have higher prevalence rates of infidelity. Or somebody who's dealing with addiction, whether it's pornography addictions or sex addiction. Another factor that I always encourage people to look at is the environmental factors. Believe it or not, the type of jobs people have could increase the likelihood of engaging in infidelity. There are some jobs that put a lot of stress on the relationship. There are jobs that put a lot of stress on the individual and increases the likelihood for engaging in infidelity behavior. A common one that I see is people who are in the military, people who work in first responding, nurses, firefighters, and these guys have the common theme of trauma, a lot of stress. A lot of times they cannot connect to their partner. And also they have strong bond with the people that they work with who also might be struggling in their relationships.
Yeah.
So these are kind of, generally speaking, the three main facets for looking at the causes of infidelity.
I also find, and you're going to verify if this is my own little theory, that sometimes we get into affairs because we've lost a sense of ourself and we find it in this other person, right? That maybe I haven't seen myself as attractive because I've been in soccer mom mode, or I haven't had anybody ask my opinion about something for a long time. And this other person, it's not even about that person. It's the way I rediscovered a part of myself that I lost that I haven't seen so very long. And I get to re-experience it through that person.
Sure, that is also one of the causes of infidelity, but for me also that feels that fit into relationship dissatisfaction. It is my firm belief, if you're in a healthy relationship, your partner should be your de facto therapist,
Mm.
right? So sometimes we look for this need outside the relationship because we don't feel fulfilled in our own life, and also maybe our partner is not checking our blind spot and actually reminding us how wonderful and awesome we are, right? When you find somebody else who can have a spark of this thing that you're looking for, it's going to be easy to be attracted to them. It's like a moth to a flame.
Yeah, because they make it easy. They're not challenging us to do anything that asks us to do hard conversations with our partner. They're a blank slate, and they hold us in that positive perspective that our client or that our partners don't do anymore.
Excellent point. I always say that affairs, I always remind me of those, back in the day, the Hollywood cutout, it's like a set. It's not a really real relationship. It's a relationship proxy. Anybody can seem to be the best lover, the best listener in an affair because the relationship is simple, is really based on one or two facets. You don't do taxes together, you don't raise kids together. So of course, everybody's going to appear to be the perfect partner.
And you have that new relationship energy that's giving you all those hormones and all those surges that you're like, yeah, I love this. This is real.
Absolutely. The novelty is a big factor of it as well, too.
Yeah. So why do people not stop?
Why do people not stop? We can spend hours talking about that. I can give you some common manifestation that I see in clinical practice. Sometimes there's this wrong idea that somehow that I'm gonna do this and I won't be discovered, and it's always boggled my mind because you hear about people discovering infidelity, you see it in the movies. So sometimes it's the foolishness of thinking that nobody's going to find out. The case that I'm really interested in, sometimes infidelity is a selfish act of love. And it sounds crazy to say. I work with a lot of clients where the unfaithful truly love their partner, but they have relationship dissatisfaction they're not able to meet. So for them, it's an alternative. Well, rather than divorcing my partner or leaving this relationship, let me outsource this need to somebody else because I love my partner so much and I don't want to leave them. This is the alternative. And sometimes people get stuck with the third party. The third party is the term that I use for the other person in the affair. Sometimes they have their own agenda, and once you cross those lines and they're not done with the affair, they could blackmail you. They could threaten the discovery. So sometimes somebody could be done with the affair, but they can't leave because they worry about the other person outing them to their partner.
So when you talked about that piece about like maybe I'm doing this so that I can stay in the relationship. So an example might be, hey, maybe my partner can't have sex anymore. Maybe there's an injury, let's just get crazy. They're in a wheelchair now and they can't have sex with you anymore. And so instead of you having to end the relationship with this person that you love very much, but you can't get your sexual needs met, you might go have an affair so that you don't burden your partner with feeling bad about the fact that they can't take care of you.
That's one example of this dynamic, but also it's really more along the lines that there are a lot of aspects of the relationship that's working. Like these guys are great co-parents, great partners of everything else, but they have one domain in the relationship that's lacking, and let's say sexuality. Whether it's because of illness or maybe compatibility, somebody is vanilla and somebody identify on the other end of the kink, right? So the person I'm thinking like, well, there's so many things in this relationship that I don't want to give up. I don't want to throw that away. So there's this small portion of the pie that I really want that I can't have here for whatever reason, right? Let me outsource that somewhere else so that I'm not throwing away the baby with the bathwater, so to speak.
Yep, which makes sense. I guess the part that feels like the betrayal for our clients then is that you changed the agreement without letting me participate in the negotiations, right? We leased a Volvo and you came home with a Mercedes and you didn't even like ask me if I'm okay with the increased car payments or the responsibility. And that's the betrayal. It's not that I wouldn't understand that you want to have sex with somebody else if I can't produce, right?
Yeah.
But that you didn't give me an opportunity to have an opinion about what we're going to do.
And I would say that is the most tragic aspect of that, because really I always feel like if you have a time machine and people have those conversations, most of the time there would have been a different way for them to resolve those deficit without having to resort to an affair. But also at a worst case scenario, I always tell people, like, if you're not happy with yourself or you're not having a relationship, you have options. Go to counseling to fix those issues, or at a minimum, leave the relationship before you break somebody's heart.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, a lot of these things, especially in the relationship deficit, they're workable, assuming people actually start the relationship for the right reason versus the couple who just were incompatible from day one.
Yeah, it's just that you've left me out of it completely, as if I don't have any say about what happens to me. And then you're sort of managing me because you don't want to have a difficult conversation with me. And so you manage what you want to deal with. And that's where the mess comes in.
Yep, it is a selfish unilateral decision on acting on a specific problem, and the other person, that's amplified the affect of the betrayal. Not only I went to somebody else to fulfill those needs, I chose to act on this issue unilaterally without involving you, and you're the one who's footing the bill for that decision.
And when that happens, it's been my experience, and tell me if you agree, that that's where some of the real problems happen, because then I'm no longer, as the partner that's on the receiving end, making a decision about forgiving a behavior, but it actually starts to speak about your character, right? That you don't allow me to have space or influence, or like I'm being managed because it's inconvenient to deal with me saying no.
Absolutely, but this also highlight another different aspect. This is the difference between the vantage point of the betrayed and the unfaithful, especially the ones when you have both partners who were not having their needs met in the relationship. Oftentimes I hear the betrayed to say, you know what, I'm in the same sexless marriage that you're in. And I'm just using sex as an example, right?
Yeah.
But you don't see me acting on this deficit by cheating, right? But I always feel like, dysfunction manifests differently. So the betrayed might have not acted on that deficit by going outside the marriage. They might have acted on it by being distant, being emotionally cold, right? But it becomes an issue of, what makes a person, compromise their moral compass to act on deficit that way versus another way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I want to shift to your book because while I've read both of them, your book that you have that's called Unfaithful and Unrepentant: Affairs Beyond the Hope of Repair, and it has a little devil in it for those of you that are listening and not watching this. I think this is super important because I think for most of us that work with couples, within a few sessions, I can tell by the attitude of the person that had the affair whether the relationship is going to make it or not. And I think that that's sort of what so talk to this about this idea of knowing the difference between unfaithful and unrepentant, because this is important.
Perfect. So you're spot on about your observation. So this book was written for two people, right? The therapist who really doing awesome work, but despite their effort, they feel like, this is just not going in the right direction, right? Because not the therapy piece, it's really the type of unfaithful partner that you're dealing with who really make the recovery journey difficult. But also, this was written for the betrayed partners who really want to know at what point of time I have to accept the fact that healing by repairing the relationship is not a viable option. Because there are a lot of times where the betrayed is really doing everything that they can to repair trust, but they're not successful because the unfaithful partner fit in one of these archetypes. So the book actually outlined the archetypes of unfaithful partners who make the journey of recovery complicated. And it's interesting to me that the more I work with couples, the more I work with unfaithful partners, the more I begin to see those specific themes, and they actually have common origin story. They also have common way that they interact in the therapy process, and how the way they interact actually block the milestones of recovery. So that's in a nutshell what this book is about, is really to showcase these archetypes and to really paint a clear picture of how is it going to impact the therapy process. And as therapists, we're trained to inspire hope. And it was hard for me to write this book to say, these are, these are the challenging things. But for me, I feel like healing from infidelity should not be seen always as repairing the relationship, because that's unattainable for everyone. Sometimes you have to heal individually.
So give some examples, if you would, of those behaviors that you see in the room that you're like, I think this one's heading towards the unrepentant, and I will be more supportive and less surprised if this one doesn't make out.
So I'll give you the example of the archetype of the insatiable ambition, right? So these are the type of unfaithful partners who oftentimes value financial and occupational success above everything else. These guys are driven, right? Work and success, whether through money or career advancement, is the most important thing to them. Oftentimes, they have infidelity in the workplace. A lot of it has to do with the power position they have in their relationship at work. So let's say that they decide to repair their relationship with their partner. One of the challenges things that they want to make is that they say, I'm not going to change my interaction with a third party at work because I don't want somebody to put limits on how I manage my career. I don't want to lose money by giving up this connection. I don't want to create an HR problem for myself because of this. So my need to be successful in my career trump your need as a betrayed partner for actually changing my interaction with a third party. Now imagine if you're the betrayed partner, how can you rebuild trust when you know that the unfaithful is continuing to interact or choosing to have the third party in their life? Not because they want to continue to have the affair, just because they're telling you that my career is more important. That's the challenge. They're setting an unrealistic expectation for the betrayed to operate under in order for them to actually rebuild trust.
Yeah. And I think that you're sort of speaking about something that I find very problematic when I'm working with couples that have had infidelity, is this lack of empathy, right? Like, one of the things that I find myself looking for the most is, if I'm the person that was betrayed and my partner is showing me empathy, it can't just be I'm sorry this hurt you. It has to be this guttural, like, I would rather lose one of my limbs than ever put you through this again. And I'm going to figure out what allowed this to be in my thinking or an option for me, and let you know how I'm going to protect us from ever being in this situation again.
Absolutely. And I think that's the normal and healthy thing that for somebody to expect when they're in this position, right? And again, and that's always going to be a challenge, because the betrayed always feel like, if I was the one who did this, I would be interacting very differently than what I'm seeing from you as the unfaithful partner. Another example of another archetype is the lovesick archetype. These are the folks who develop, part of, remember what we talked earlier about finding a spark in somebody else, and you just kind of lose it and you see somebody and you just run away and join the circus, so to speak. What happens with that specific archetype, oftentimes, after discovery of the infidelity, they don't want to let go of the third party. They want to keep them in their life as a right. Well, you can't do that, because once you cross the lines of appropriateness in somebody, it's really hard to unring that bell. And the challenge here with somebody who is with the partner who's lovesick, oftentimes they're the codependency. So the betrayed says, fine, I'll work with you. Yes, fine, keep the third party in your life, but 1 minute, let's make sure we're not going to go inappropriate again. And in a way, you're kind of enabling your partner to go in that direction.
Yes.
I really believe that in order for somebody to heal, the third party should not be in your guys' life, period. There are some rare exceptions. And the only thing that I have come across where I said, okay, sure, maybe, if, maybe an affair resulted in a pregnancy and now you have a child with a third party. And even then, it's a hard sell. If you're going to keep the third party in your life, there have to be clear parameters to extend of that relationship.
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of questions that come up a lot in my office. So say that there's been an affair and the one partner says, okay, I want to have access to everything now. I want to see all your emails. I want to see all your messages. I get to have access to your phone. And the one partner says, but that's my privacy. But that's my stuff. Why would you want the passcode to my cell phone? How do you respond to those clients in session? Please tell me those are in your office too.
Absolutely. I always say that in a healthy relationship, there shouldn't be any secrets. I don't know, at some point of time in society, we got this idea that you're in a relationship, but there is a part of yourself that you should hide from your partner. I really feel like, I have nothing to hide. Whatever my partner wants to see, they can see before any kind of infidelity. But when infidelity happened, it is really crucial to have transparency. And I would say, like, who you lost the right to privacy, assuming that level of privacy you're asking for is healthy in the first place, when you entangled your partner in this whole messy business of affairs. But here's what I emphasize: transparency by itself is not going to fix anything because it's surveillance, right? I'm okay with it being as a tool, as a crutch, until we actually address the factors that led to the infidelity and seeing actual evidence of those factors being fixed, because that's how trust being rebuilt. So I see it as a mean to an end. If you need to, if it's going to make your life better to monitor my interaction because you don't trust me yet, more power to you, because it's my burden to earn your trust because I was the one who broke it. As long as we don't say that transparency is the only solution, because there's a lot of people where them it's an easy fix. They say, sure, I'll give you the passcode. Anybody can do that. What I'm interested in is the real work of fixing the factors that have led to the infidelity in the first place.
Yeah, because if you let me have access to my texts and I'm just deleting my texts all the time, who cares? And then that's putting the onus on the person that was injured to try to make sure that we're solid. If I get to have access to like your like location finder all the time so that I can feel better that you're where you're supposed to be, that's still putting the onus on the hurt one to make sure that we're solid and good.
And you bring up another valid point too. A lot of the trade partners, they feel like, especially the ones who were secure, they didn't have any ounce of jealousy prior to any of this thing happen. They feel like, okay, now I'm miserable because I have to be this person that I always didn't want to be. You're putting me in a position where I have to monitor you. I don't even want to do that, right? But they're stuck because part of them feel like they can't trust their partner. So which means that they have to give themselves permission to allow themselves to utilize this tool as a mean to an end. So it's not really fun for the betrayed. They don't want to be the policeman who's monitoring interaction, but yet there they are.
One of the tasks that I find myself needing to do as a couples therapist is also giving space for the partner that did the betraying to grieve the loss of the person that they're letting go. Because hopefully they're making the decision. That's a whole other conversation for another podcast. But let's hope that they're willing to let that person go. And they can't use their partner as their grief sponsor. So can you talk a little bit about that role that we do?
I think it is really crucial for both the unfaithful and betrayed, especially if we're dealing with an emotional affair, to understand that even though the outlet that was used to fulfill this need is not healthy, you are losing an outlet. There will be a grieving process. And I think it's healthy for the betrayed to know that the unfaithful is actually going through this grieving process, because if all of a sudden they just jump, they feel like pretend like nothing happened, they gotta wonder, are they really, did they really give up the affair or are they not? So I would argue that there is a healthy need to see the unfaithful struggle with that sense of loss. You'd be surprised at how many betrayed partners have the capacity, despite the hurt and pain, and still want to be there for the unfaithful to support them in grieving the loss of the third party. I'm always at awe when I encounter those wonderful human beings that are able to have that capacity, even though that they're hurt. But my policy on that one is really to focus on individual therapy, because it's hard to ask the betrayed to be there for you to grieve the loss of the third party. Individual therapy is really the best outlet for that. But I also think communicating about that with the betrayed is important, so that the betrayed is not wondering, are you, still interacting with that person, or are you actually going through the process to let go?
Because it provides that closure. And I think what it also does, and I'd love your opinion on this, when my clients are making demands that in front of me, you call that person and tell them that you can't see them anymore. Right? So you get those like, I need you to call them right now, and I need to be here, and I need you to put on speakerphone, and I need you to hear them, say, I can't see you anymore and I don't love you anymore. That's not healthy, but like seeing that they're experiencing the grief hopefully has the same effect.
Great question. So that's also another fine line that therapists have to walk, because I do believe closing the door In order for this door to be closed, it has to be a decision made by the unfaithful versus the betrayed is demanding that of them.
Yes.
Because every time when this door was closed because of the betrayed said so, it always get back to be reopened again. And now we're dealing with more betrayal, more trauma. But it's important for the betrayed to have some kind of verification that this door was closed. But that doesn't mean I dictate a message, say this, and I move your lips and say those words, because that's not useful, right?
Yeah.
Because even if the unfaithful did it, you as the betrayed, you're not going to like it because you feel like I had to make you do this,
Yes.
which doesn't really have any value. And oftentimes, what you will see the third party does is say, "Oh, I get it. Your husband and your wife is telling you to do this. So wink, wink, that's not what it is. You probably don't mean it." Right? Which actually, it achieved the opposite impact that the person is trying to achieve by doing this in the first place.
Yeah, it's a hollow victory. You
Yep.
got what you wanted. Somebody parroted what you told them to say. And there's probably not any emotion behind it that feels encouraging. It's more just like, let me do what this person said for me to do as penance. So maybe I can get out of the hot seat with them. And that's not empathy.
You are 100% correct.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes up, and I would love for you to give advice for clients that find themselves in this space. So most of my clients that have had a betrayal happen to them, they have this need to kind of like revisit it or keep talking about their trauma timeline because it's important for their processing, and their partner gets frustrated with it, right? Why are we talking about this again? I already said that I'm sorry. Oh my God, I can't believe you're bringing this up again. What do you say that these couples, is there a healthy amount of time to keep talking about it? Is it appropriate for a partner to want to keep going over this and going over it? What is your thoughts for them?
Great question. So I think we have to define what do we mean when we talk about it. I do believe that there has to be a point where we are done with the narrative of the affair, which is the details of what happened and why it happened and the interrogation part. But a lot of times people don't let go of that because they never fully got an accurate narrative, which means that it is the therapist's job is to make sure that we collectively come up with an agreed upon narrative. Here's what happened, here's why it happened, and the story makes sense. The story is logical, it's not a BS story. Once we achieve that, then we all have to make the agreement. We're not going to revisit the what and the why because already we know that. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean we don't talk about the trauma, right? It's okay for us to talk about that this is a struggle, that I'm still dealing with the PTSD symptoms, I'm having triggers. That's fine and healthy to talk about. That doesn't lend itself to a timeline because everybody's different. So the unfaithful need to be okay and willing to be there for however long it takes, because the betrayed doesn't want to be talking about it. And I think I was reminded of faith, like, do you think the betrayed likes talking about it, bringing it up? They don't like it, right? So, give them what they need so they can actually move past it. And a lot of times it's about how they show up during the trigger and are they successful. But the common mistake the betrayed does when they have a trigger is that they'll feel like the only way for them to deal with the trigger is by asking, tell me again why you did this, and asking questions about a narrative, when in reality, they already have those answers. They're actually not looking for the answers that they already have. They're looking for validation. They're looking for empathy. And I always say, well, take out the middleman, right? Let's not ask questions about narrative, especially if we've done that. Just go and tell your partner what you need from them. I want you to tell me how sorry you are about what you did. I want you to tell me that you're going to work hard at fixing those issues. You give them faithful in this situation a pathway to succeed. But I always tell the betrayed, if your way of dealing trigger is asking them, why did you do this again? They will always fail because that part is done. That's in the past. They have no pathway of fixing that. Give them a pathway in the present so they can show up for you.
Beautiful advice. I could geek out on this stuff all day. Okay, one last question, but it's not an easy question. The number one question that all of my clients have when they look at me in their teary eyes is, how do I regain trust?
It's the most important question, and the answer is ridiculously simple. So you can only rebuild trust by clearly understanding all the different factors and identifying all the different factors that have led to the infidelity. So if you identify the why, whether it's an individual, relational, or environmental factors, and see actual evidence of those whys being fixed, then you're going to be able to rebuild trust. Because really, it is a cause and effect. Infidelity is a need-driven behavior. If you uncover the need and actually address, why that happened and seeing actual evidence of that issue being resolved, then you don't need to worry about that anymore because you address the cause. That is the only way for a trust to be rebuilt, assuming people are honest with themselves about whether or not what happened is forgivable. Because sometimes it's an issue. It's not an issue of, sometimes the unfaithful is actually doing everything, pushing the right buttons, right? Doing everything humanly possible to change and becoming a better person, but trust are not being rebuilt because the betrayed is not honest with themselves about what happened is being forgivable. And there is no right or wrong answer. Everybody have a different worldview about what they deem forgivable or not. Does that make sense?
I love that. No, that puts a whole new spin on the idea of trust and how much power I have over my trust. I love that. This is awesome. Okay, so last tip. Do you have any last tips for couples that are maybe at the beginning of, I'm sorry if you are at the beginning, but besides finding you or finding an amazing therapist, what should they be doing? What does that self-care process look like?
First self-care process, I would emphasize for people to accept that, and I even say this in my books, infidelity is one of these things that you cannot fix on your own. You really need to seek qualified help. Two, please understand that the process of healing or the concept of healing doesn't always mean repairing the relationship. Healing, meaning healing from the trauma. If you're able to use the infidelity as a catalyst to have a better, stronger relationship, more power to you. But that might not be attainable for you, and that's okay as well. Three, please minimize external influences. I've seen a lot of times when discovery happened, they put it on Facebook, they involve the kids, family, friends. Now, this happened for a variety of reasons. A lot of times people are in pain and they just want to process, but it creates all these unnecessary complications down the road. And, when you decide to make a decision, now you have all these people who know what happened, and now you have to explain why did you decide to go this way or that way. And just really remembering that despite this awful, hurtful experience, that this could actually, there's a silver lining. Because if infidelity happened to you, then that means there's something seriously wrong in your relationship or your individual life. And now it's an opportunity to address those issues face on so that you can recover from it, whether it's by rebuilding the relationship or by healing individually.
It doesn't have to be devastating. It can be problematic, and you can rebuild something that was better than it was.
Absolutely. And like I said, for some, infidelity actually allowed them to end a relationship that they should have ended a long time ago. And for some, allowed them to actually repair a deficit that allowed them to have a better and stronger relationship than they had before.
Because it forces you to have conversations that you weren't thinking you could tolerate, and now you're forced to tolerate it, and then you're rebuilding.
Absolutely, because that's a wake-up call that you cannot ignore. It's just like one of those things that's difficult for people to sweep under the rug.
Thank you, Talal. Okay, 2 books that I want you both, well, everyone who's listening, maybe more than 2, check out. One's called Infidelity, the best worst thing that could happen to your marriage, the complete guide on how to heal from affairs, and Unfaithful and Unrepentant, Affairs Beyond the Hope of Repair. So how will people find you if they want to reach out to you?
They can find me on my main website, talalalsaleem.com, or the Infidelity Counseling Center. And they can also find my YouTube channel, the Infidelity Doctor, and they can actually see a docuseries working with real couple using the systematic affair recovery therapy model to get an idea of what the recovery process looks like.
I so appreciate you coming on. I have admired your work for a long time, so it was a real treat to me that you were willing to come and talk to me about the work that you do, because it is important, and I do very much respect the work that you do for all the couples that get to work with you. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the D-Spot. Find me, Dr. Dana McNeil, and my guests on social media using the links down below. Subscribe for new episodes weekly, and leave a comment letting us know how and if you can relate, or what topics you'd like us to cover next. See you next time, and don't forget, going to therapy is cool.